Hello, everyone. This is the first lecture in the topic of consciousness and its variations, what I call the sleep, dreams, and drug chapter. In this first video lecture, I just want to introduce the topic of consciousness and what it means. There is a short video activity that goes along with this one that I would traditionally do in class as a group, but you'll have to do that one on your own time. So consciousness, for our purposes, is defined as basically your awareness of your surroundings. Henry James argued that you were never unconscious, that all these different states of being were different kinds. Now, this makes sense a little bit if you think about what consciousness means, right? When we think about consciousness as our awareness of our surroundings, sometimes we're, if you've ever been in a coma, people argue that if you even individuals in a coma can perceive their environment. So James theorized that the coma wasn't being unconscious. It was just an altered state. Sleep, likewise, is a state of consciousness. It's just a different state of consciousness than being alert or being awake. Dreams are a form of consciousness. Again, they're just different than when you're awake. The same thing with drugs, with intoxication, prescription, or illicit. But yeah, so anyway, so that's what James theorized. If you've done your introspection assignment, that's really the question that I asked you there is, James said that he's the one that coins the term your stream, and that as we go through our day, we're like a river and we just meander our awareness, our sensitivities. When we space out, as some of you called your paper, right? You space out, that's still a state of consciousness. It's just a different one than when you're highly alert and highly focused, right? Our consciousness, though, requires some level of attention. And take that word apart, what it means to attend to something means to take care of it, right? So our attention is the way that we attend, that we focus on our surroundings or not, right? When you're not paying attention, you're not focusing on something. Here's sort of I'm going to jump ahead to the chapter on memory. If you're going to remember something, you must pay attention, right? We cannot remember something if we do not attend to it. And our attention, though we live in a culture that claims we can multitask, what psychologists tells us is you cannot multitask. We really cannot do two things at once unless, as we saw in the video on the corpus callosum, unless, maybe your corpus callosum is severed, but our brains we really can't concentrate on two different things at the same time. What we think of as multitasking, according to psychologists, is in fact shifting your attention so very quickly. And younger brains are better at shifting their attention very quickly and efficiently than our older brains. So younger brains are a little bit better at shifting their attention between their cell phone and the road, right? I mean, think about it. The last time you text and drive, and I'm pretty sure you probably have at some point, right? You're holding your phone or trying to find your music, or in my case, I'm trying to get to my podcast, right? I'm doing this and I'm shifting, I'm going back and forth. So I'm looking up, looking down, looking up, looking down, right? Same thing if you're trying to do your homework while you're watching TV. If you're like me, and I've done this a lot over my career, right? It takes forever to get your homework done while you're watching TV because you're shifting your attention back and forth. If you were to only focus on one thing, it wouldn't take as much time. It takes less cognitive energy. So the activity that I have associated with this one is an example about attention. And you are invited to pay attention to one specific thing. And then at the end, I don't want to give it away, because if you've seen it, like we're together, I always say, if you've seen this, don't say anything, because if you alter the environment, then you don't get what you're trying, the point. And that's really it. That's all I'm going to say about this. I'll move on to the next slide, but the activity goes along with this part of the discussion of this part of the lecture, which is, can you really multitask? Right, or the power of your attention. Okay, So the next slide refers to biological rhythms, or what we call it biological or environmental clock. So this is your circadian rhythm that you may have heard about. And your circadian, it's a legit thing, but or your sleep cycle, which is simply the biological mechanisms that affect your alertness throughout the day. And there legit is a pattern of our ability to attend to things. And it's about 25 hours. Now, we have artificially created a 24-hour clock, right? A 24-hour, which is why we have a leap year, because really the natural cycle of our biological rhythm is slightly more than 24 hours. There's sometime around 9 o'clock in the morning, and then again at 9 o'clock at night, we have these peaks sometime. And then, and you know, 9, we're not talking 9 specifically, it could be 8, it could be 10. But the point is that there is this alertness that peaks at about every 12 hours, and then there's a slump about every 12 hours. So the slump is somewhere around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then again at 3 o'clock in the morning. You think about if you've ever had one of these experiences. At 5 in the afternoon, you're just exhausted, and you're telling yourself you're going to go to bed early tonight. 8, 9 o'clock comes around, and you're still up doing homework, or you're out playing, if you're out with your friends. This is, and you end up staying up until midnight. You doggone it, you were going to go to bed at 9. Well, that's that natural rhythm, the rhythm of alertness, and then the rhythm of the slump. For me, like some parts of the world have organized their culture around the slumps. That's what the siesta is, the late afternoon nap. For me, it's like 3 o'clock. Similarly, with this alertness, you also have things like pain sensitivity, right? I don't know if they still do it, but they used to have the Relay for Life, which would walk, you know, people would walk all night long. And someone asked, why are we walking at night? Why couldn't we do this during the day? And their point was that for a lot of people, the pain is worse at night, specifically 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, right? Which would parallel into 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But that's that pain. That's all I'm trying to talk about is their circadian rhythm. So it's alertness, body temperature, hunger. Hunger is also, there's this natural cycle. So theoretically, if you wait, I remember my husband used to drive me nuts. Kids would come home at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and they're hungry. That's their natural hunger cycle. And he'd be like, no, you gotta wait till dinner. Well, he wouldn't feed them until 7 o'clock at night. Well, by then they weren't hungry anymore, right? Because that's your natural appetite. Your appetite naturally, it goes up at certain times of the day and naturally goes down at certain times of the day. So if you can just push through it, if you're trying not to eat, then eventually your appetite will drop again. And as I'm talking about this, my stomach's growling. Okay, another one. So another important thing from this slide is the idea that this rhythm has implications for the natural daylight cycle. Really important idea on this slide is melatonin. And melatonin is the hormone, we've talked about hormones before, that's implicated in your sleep cycle. And your melatonin is regulated by a little nucleus. Oh, I think it's in your book. I've seen an image of it just recently, but it's regulated by a little cluster of nerve cells that runs from your eye to your occipital lobe. This is your CSN. I always see it referred to as CSN. So as light, particularly sunlight, passes through this little bitty cluster, it sends messages to release or not to release melatonin. When there is daylight, and it has to be like full spectrum light, right? Light causes the production of melatonin to decline. It's kind of paradoxical. More melatonin is produced when there is not light going through this CSN, this nucleus. So increased melatonin causes drowsiness, decreased melatonin causes alertness, which then if you work nights, and I had that opportunity at one point, you know, and you get off at like 6 o'clock in the morning, the sun's not fully up, you're just exhausted, You get home at 8, you're finally getting ready to lay down at 8 o'clock in the morning and you can't sleep, right? Well, one thing that's happened is you expose yourself to melatonin. And the second is now you're at the part of that sleep cycle, that circadian rhythm that wakes you up. So it's just, in long term, I'll just say this. Oh yeah, this is a chapter where we're going to talk about sleep. Long-term third shift workers actually have a shorter life expectancy. Working third shift for many years is bad for your health. I'm just going to say that. Third shift workers are more likely to be obese, they're more likely to be overweight, and they're more likely to suffer health problems. And this is implicated from a physiological, from an evolutionary psychological perspective, because your body is reading fatigue as stress. Or we are built, at least one theory about why we sleep is that we are biologically built to sleep at night. So when we're doing something that is an opposite of our biological programming, that creates physiological stress. The last concept on here is jet lag. And jet lag simply means it's the term that we give for physiological adjustments we have to make when we move, let's see, I always get this kind of confused. Specifically when you are shortening your day, so, or lengthening your day. But when you've got the physiological processes associated with daylight out of whack with the clock, right? I mean, humans historically couldn't cross time zones in the course of a day like we can now. And so our circadian rhythm is out of whack with the clock. They say that, and I don't get to travel that much, so I don't know, but they say that it's easier to adapt when you go from East Coast to West Coast, when you make your day longer, right? It's easier to adjust as opposed to when you make your day shorter. This is also advice that they give to people who are transitioning from a daytime job to a third shift. Basically, stay up. Stay up you cannot stockpile sleep. I'm going to stop right here because this is 12 minutes, and I will pick that topic up in the next video lecture.